Hello everyone, welcome back to the Christ MotoGP Podcast, and another weekend is done at MotoGP. And guess what? The championship lead has shrunk again to 10 points, but it's still Jorge Martin in the lead after Pecco Bagnaia did the double in Motegi. Plenty to talk about this weekend. Well, maybe off track, but more than on track. But joining me as ever, Jordan Moreland, is Lewis Duncan and Pete McLaren. Where do I want to start, Pete? There was a few things that looked quite promising after Saturday's sprint, but the Grand Prix didn't really deliver on maybe what we thought, and Bagnaia does the double and closes the gap in the championship.
Yeah, that's right, Jordan, isn't it? I mean, you put up the lap times on social, didn't you, of Bagnaia, and I mean, the variation from one lap to the next is what, 0.2, 0.3 of a second. As soon as you see that, I mean, you know that A, there wasn't much overtaking, and B, there's not much chance of anyone really catching him with the pace he was running. I mean, faultless again from Pecco, as we do occasionally see. But as you say, Saturday really, I mean, that kind of blew our chances of seeing the Pecco versus Martin fight that we wanted because of Martin's fall in qualifying. And yeah, you know, of course, everyone's discussing overtaking problems in MotoGP. Why aren't we seeing more action? You know, I think also there's a bit of a qualifying problem in MotoGP. I think, you know, we've discussed this before, haven't we, Jordan, where this one 15-minute shootout decides the grid for two races.
Yeah.
And, you know, if Martin had started alongside Pecco, he put on a great charge, didn't he, to close down on him? Who knows? We might have seen a battle. But we did see some overtaking. Marquez fighting his way through the order, didn't we? As well as Martin. But, yeah, as far as the race win, really... And sadly, once Acosta had fallen again, you know, he really had the potential, Acosta, didn't he, to light up those races, but it just wasn't to be, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, we'll come on to Pedro Acosta's weekend at Lewis, but it was, as Pete says, qualifying, and we've kind of touched on it off camera. You know, the riders say once you get in position in a Grand Prix from the start, really, the first two laps, that's pretty much your race kind of settled with the way the bikes are at the minute, and it was really evident this weekend, wasn't it?
Yeah, I hate to say it, but it's become a bit Formula One now, hasn't it? It's very much, you know, the grid position is key, and obviously in MotoGP having a good grid position has always been important. But we have, you know, we have seen in the past riders coming from further down the grid and taking race wins and fighting for the podium. And yeah, we did see Jorge Martin and Marc Marquez come from sort of 11th and 9th on the grid, but you're talking. I think it's, you know, those were great rides, but it's hard to kind of go, oh, well, you know, yeah, you can still do lots of overtaking, because if you look at the end results, you had the top four covered by 4.2, 4.3 seconds, and you've got 13 and a half seconds until the next guy, you know, and that's, this is what we're seeing, is the reason why we've got like Marc and Jorge able to make up these ground is because there's just such a massive gulf now between the top guys and the rest of the field. And that's not criticising the rest of the field, that is, you know, that's just MotoGP. Those top four guys are clearly in a league of their own. But that, coupled with the kind of lack of overtaking, means you get, you know, if one of them has a bad qualifying, they come through the grid, you get a lap or two of action, then they kind of run, sort of follow the leader. And I think Motegi kind of highlights the worst sort of damage that the current rules have done to the racing, with the aero, with the ride height devices. You know, Pecco and Martin and Marquez said the same thing. Once you get to about half a second behind a rider, there's nothing you can do. The front becomes too critical, hard to manage. There's too much turbulent air. There's too much tire pressure goes up, and that's it. And yeah, Acosta, like you guys say, was maybe the guy to change that, because we've seen Acosta kind of defy kind of conventional wisdom anyway when it comes to this sort of thing. But his crash, Pecco thinks, was kind of a direct result of the fact that overtaking is so hard now that he had to try and push early to make something happen.
Yeah, two crashes for Pedro Acosta. We'll actually start there because it was the big talking point really on Saturday. Pete, you know, he took the lead in the sprint. Obviously, he got pole position, third youngest in history, behind Fabio Quartararo and Marquez. We'll come on to that qualifying session as well later, because there's other stuff in it. But yeah, it looked like it was the perfect story for Acosta and Tech 3 that took the lead, and he was looking so good, and he just went down, and it was a real shock. Not a shock, but it was like, oh, the chance kind of went. But then you kind of thought maybe that the Grand Prix could do it again. But then, as Lewis mentioned, just maybe pushing a bit too much and lost the front of the last corner.
Yeah, I think he called it the saddest moment of his career or something after the race, didn't he? But he did also say it was the best feeling he's had on the bike all year, isn't it? And that's the thing. He's got the speed, isn't he? We've seen rookies that have come in and fallen off a lot. Casey Stoner comes to mind, when he was on that satellite Honda trying to make the difference, wasn't he, to the factory bikes and having to override it. But the point is he's shown the speed. And it feels a bit like that with Acosta. KTM have signed him for next year, not because he could ride around safely in 8th place or something, because he's got the speed to raise the level of the bike. Where was Binder on Sunday, 6th place, 18 seconds, back.
Yeah.
So to have somebody, a rookie, come in and be taking the fight. Okay, he wasn't there at the end, we didn't get to see what he could do, but in the sprint he got it, 2/3 distance, didn't he, and was, as you say, starting to pull away and maybe just overdid it. So yeah, it's going to be obviously an upsetting one, a frustrating one for him, but it's just all part of the learning curve, isn't it? And I think the important thing is the speed, and let's see where he goes from here. Of course, 2 races, 2 crashes. It looks bad on paper, but medium tire in the Grand Prix versus the soft in the sprint, double the fuel. There are different circumstances there, aren't there? And it's all stuff that he needs to learn, doesn't it?
Yeah, Lewis, any take on it this weekend?
Yeah, I think the Casey Stoner comparison is a really, really good one. It actually popped into my mind over the weekend when I saw Acosta crashing again, because of course we've seen in the 2 Misano races good pace, but that crashes there. And I think it's easy to forget that Pedro is a rookie. I think we put so much pressure on him because it's like, wow, look at the performance. Look, this is this guy who blazed a trail through the junior categories, and you expect results straight away, which is a little bit unfair, really. We saw from Friday, and I think even Pecco said at the time, Pedro's a threat here. You look at his long run pace versus Binder's long run pace, and okay, Binder had that 1 lap speed, but he was not even remotely a consideration for that race. And I think that's the thing that Pedro and KTM needs to take away from this weekend, was just how big a step ahead he was of the other KTM riders. That was impressive. Yes, he crashed. Yes, he does need to start sort of ironing out those mistakes, because they have been a bit too numerous lately. But again, the consistency, as Pete says, and speed has been there. This is basically since Misano now that he's Aragon now, really, that he's really turned things around. He's gone back to older settings which work for him. He's got this new KTM chassis recently that the others have discarded, and he seems to like very much. So it's all moving in the right direction. It just, mistakes happen, and it's good to do them now. This is a guy who's making mistakes because he pushes, as you say, Jordan. He's not wobbling around, not wobbling around at the back of the grid, and that's why he's been saying he's pushing, and that's when mistakes happen. We see this with Marc in his early career as well. He made a lot of crashes, but that's how he found the limit. And yeah, Pedro will get there. Yeah,
I definitely think so. And just staying on KTM, I don't know, you both have probably seen the clip of Jack Miller. There's 2 things in that clip. There's down the back straight, you've seen the vapor trails coming off the KTM Arrow, which I thought was, for a MotoGP bike, and I thought really cool. It ran a sort of F1 type of style. You could see how the aerodynamics and stuff were really working in that humid sort of temperature. And then later on in the clip, as he's breaking down the bottom of the hill, you see the amount of chatter that he had. And I think when we obviously hear the riders talk about they have the issues with the vibrations, and when you see it in slow motion like that, Pete, kind of just shows what Jack and the other KTM riders have been dealing with this year.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I think all the manufacturers have had it to some degree, but some sort of Ducati, we heard in testing, they had it sometimes. They've been able to move away from it. But Honda and KTM riders, some affected more than others, depends on riding style and all that kind of thing. But, they're still having this issue. And that clip, really, that was an extreme example of it, wasn't it? But yeah, I mean, as you could see, Jack has to almost stand up off the bike to stop it shaking him off. And what can you do? You can't go fast when the bike is doing that. So good for the team, I'm sure, to see that and see exactly what was going on there. It's such a difficult. Chatter is, I think, remember one MotoGP engineer telling me, it's the one thing that's not been solved by all of the, it's the one mystery that still exists, let's say, in motorcycle engineering is chatter. And there's no clear, okay, you've got chatter, vibration, you do this step, and you get rid of it. It's so much more complicated than that, and there's so many unknowns. You've got all these sort of weird little vibrations on the bike, and then at some point they all just combine and do, they start bouncing together, exactly as you saw with Jack. So the team try and move the settings around to break up those vibrations, and that's what they're trying to do with Jack. But as he said, it just moved the problem onto the following corner. It then happens at another speed and everything else. So yeah, they've still got to get on top of it. And really, it's hampered, I think, for Augusto Fernandez as well. I think Jack and Augusto, it's really hurt them this year, hasn't it? And as you say, Jordan, quite right to point out that clip. That was I can't remember ever seeing. I mean, chatter is even 500 days when I started at the end of the 500s. They got chatter, but that's the most extreme I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, there was a clip that someone had shared on socials. I think it's from an onboard of, I think it might be one of the Ducatis at Sachsenring, and they were following Pedro Acosta through the Omega corner, the long right, and it was just bouncing so much, and you're like, this is the early lap of this. It was like the second lap of the race, and you're like, how is he dealing with this? As it's going to get worse probably when the tyre gets more used. And I think that also highlights, Lewis, the great job that Acosta's doing with issues like this, because Miller's made it clear that he says he's not been bullshitting all year. He said this has been the problem, and it just shows it's a difficult thing to deal with, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that video clip was actually quite good for Jack in a way, because it's probably it'll lead to kind of a reevaluation of the season. I don't think we can use that as a full, excuse, because as you say, Pedro Acosta's kind of been able to work his way through it. I don't know if that's a riding style thing with the Tech 3 team have just gotten on top of it better. Who knows? I mean, he's spoken about it before as kind of being this, he said, we have this problem of vibration, go talk to Michelin. So they obviously believe it's because of this tyre. And in that clip of Miller at Motegi, you can see the tyre really wobbling away as well. So you can kind of see why they believe that the tyre is the issue. But Acosta again just defies everything. The way he brakes, the way he comes out of corners, the way everything is just. It's very much like when Marquez came in and he was putting the elbow down and that type of thing, that type of style. There's those moments every generation where someone takes the riding style onto a new level. Rossi with a leg dangle, stuff like that. It's impressive, and it's going to be interesting to see over the next few years whether that's a trend of young riders coming up, or whether that's unique to him and other people are going to have to try and learn that, and who can learn that, because it's not easy to just completely retune your brain and riding style, as as Marc Marquez has said all year, from going from the Honda to Ducati. You can't switch it on and off. That's not how it works.
Yeah, it is. Some of the clips from practice of watching Acosta, I can't believe how far he leans off the bike. Sometimes I'm like, it's almost his shoulder and his helmet, and you're touching the ground. You're like, how is he doing this? And I suppose Martin kind of is like a mixture of Martin and Marquez's style a wee bit, Acosta, where Martin hangs off a lot and Marquez, first one really with the elbow down and stuff. But Acosta's like a hybrid of those, and it just looks so incredible when you see it. But I can't wait to see how, like you said, good point, Lewis, about how future riders will try and model themselves off, Acosta, and like look at that and how they're going to bring the next level to MotoGP. That's a really good point, actually. And yeah, a good weekend for Acosta, but like Pete said, the results, and when you look at 2 DNFs, it's a bit of a what could have been, but promising, and the speed is definitely there for him. Speaking of speed and qualifying, we'll touch on the Marquez stuff, because I think it was a big thing from the Saturday where he'd set an all-time lap record. He was very happy about that. You could see the reaction from him and the Gresini team. And then I think it was about maybe 3-4 minutes later, I haven't exactly looked, but it felt like around then we seen lap time cancelled for 93 because of exceeding track limits at turn 4. Pete. So it was... there was no doubt he did go on the green, and he accepted that. But there was an issue that we then found out with the system, that there was a software glitch, and it didn't send the notification to the team straight away, and they had to do it manually. And that then led to Marquez not being able to get a lap in. He had to qualify, it was 9th place, and that's where the annoyance came from for Gresini's side. Just one of those unlucky things, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? I mean, as you say, there's no doubt he did touch the green, but the frustration from Marquez and the Gresini team was that he did have that time available, wasn't it? It's not always the case. Sometimes it's, guys do their best lap just as the flag comes out, and that's that. But he did, 2 slow laps after that, because he thought, you know what, I'm not going to do better than that. It's splitting with rain anyway. Let's not take any more risks. That's in the bag kind of thing. And then it gets cancelled at a time when there's no there's no time left for him to try again. So yeah, just one of the. I mean, I've never heard of this happening before, and let's. I think it was the race direction said it was the first time it's happened. This kind of glitch and this delay. So as long as it doesn't happen again, I guess that's it. I suppose it is something interesting. I suppose for the title contenders, especially looking forward, maybe they will have to keep an eye on what a rider's second best lap will be. If you're Martin and Bagnaia and you're on pole and there is 4 minutes to go, and your next best lap is maybe only good enough for the third row, you know what? Do another lap. Just do a banker lap, because, okay, in this case there was an unusual circumstance with the delay, but we've seen yellow flags, riders have a bad tyre, riders getting slowed down by someone ahead of them, the inevitable track limits that we always end up talking about. There's lots of things that can sort of combine, or any one of them can happen separately and ruin somebody's qualifying lap. So it maybe is just something that the teams need to think about, is if you do have one standout lap and you have time to just put another one in just in case, maybe it's worth doing. But as I say, to be honest, it was a weird qualifying session, wasn't it? With the spots of rain. Martin had fallen. You can understand why Marquez thought, you know what, that's enough. I've done enough. The lap time's still there. 30 seconds after he's crossed the line or whatever. There we go. And that was why it was that anger from Gresini, wasn't there, when it suddenly got whipped away and he realised, he's on the third row.
Yeah, Lewis, he took to Instagram as well and left a little comment on the MotoGP official page about notification times, but he then went to the stewards and got clarity on it all, and that was really it. And then the statement that we got from Mike Webb, that talked more about that. It was quite good of them to explain the reasons behind it, but it took too long, I think.
Yeah, that was the problem, and this was a statement that we had to go fishing for as well. And and this wasn't like after qualifying. This was after the sprint. This was hours after the sprint had finished. Yep. So we were talking about something that was a very long time. This was the problem. We were grateful for the explanation that Mike Webb, that was given to us from Mike Webb by Dorna. But yeah, I mean, this was, it wasn't really kind of widely shared until the Gresini press officer WhatsApp group posted the same statement that a couple of journalists, us included, got. But there was still not like an official kind of thing that came from MotoGP, and that's the problem. It's 3 weeks in a row now we've kind of had this conversation about stewarding issues, and this wasn't necessarily a stewarding issue. This was, I'm not sure who sets up the kind of who sets up the kind of the system where there is that direct communication. I don't know if that's an FIM thing or a Dorna thing. Obviously, because it's a TV thing, there's probably is an element that the Dorna, the system glitch might have come from them. Which also begs the question of, do they need to be a little bit more hot on, flagging those things, on television, because a cancelled lap can be reinstated.
Exactly.
It's not like a lost position or something. Like a cancelled lap can be reinstated. So even if there was an issue with the system or Dorna, the Dorna television kind of crew are just like, that's very clearly track limits, lap time cancelled. If there needs to be a clarification, it can be one further down the line if the stewards feel there is necessary. But yeah, the time it took to get the response, and the fact it wasn't ever going to come to us if we didn't go looking for it, is the issue there. And I think when we're talking about transparency as being a key issue for the FIM stewards right now, this situation did not help that in any way, shape or form. And yeah, it wasn't a steward's issue on this occasion, but they also didn't speak about it in the initial stewards panel document that they release after every day. I'm not saying it was because of this, but a couple of people complained, asked Dorna about it, and then 25 minutes later there was a second document being like, oh, here's a very brief explanation. It's the acknowledgement thing. It was the same with Bastianini and Martin and Mazzano. It's about acknowledging these things. And then, to be fair to them, after Sunday's race, they acknowledged something that nobody had really been paying any attention to, which was Marquez exceeding track limits on the last lap. And explaining, here's why he didn't get a penalty. That's brilliant. Do that all the time for every single instant. Just do that. That's all we're asking for. If you do that every single time, there isn't going to be a problem.
Yeah.
And I feel like people think, oh, we're negative, or you're just criticizing, blah blah blah. And we want it because we want to remove the doubt, remove the kind of these things that make MotoGP look weak, that make it look silly, that make, we want the championship to not have these problems. You look at something like Formula E, for example, and you look at all of the crazy regulation stuff that goes on there, and this person's got a penalty, and all these 5-6 drivers have got post-race penalties, and constant, and it makes Formula E look rubbish. And we don't want that here in MotoGP. So we just want transparency. Make your decisions transparent. If you have to come and speak to the media, speak to the media. If you have to do a video through Dorna's video pass, do that. Or use a stewards document. Just do these things. That's all we're asking.
Yeah, I think they've got a real chance to, they actually could set a real example to other championships if they came out and done all these things. And I think it would reflect well on MotoGP as a whole, because I don't want to get into F1 stewarding. I think it's an absolute, I don't want to swear, it's a something it's a something show. So it is terrible. And I think MotoGP has a chance to really kind of show that it's a championship that gets it right all the time, sort of thing,
And I think next year there's a real opportunity for that to change with Simon Crafar becoming the chief steward, because this is a guy who's comfortable in front of a camera and explaining complicated technical things about MotoGP. Whether the decisions and stuff he's going to be talking about people agree with, that doesn't really matter. Does the agreeing with the decision doesn't matter. Just come and explain it. Stuart Higgs and BSB is fantastic for that. It's one of the best things British Superbikes has done in a long time. Is just these, Higgs comes out on camera, goes, okay, here's why we've done this thing. Here's why this is a penalty. Here's why it's not. Great. That's fantastic. Whether you agree with the reason or not doesn't matter. At least you've got an explanation.
Exactly. It's like he does it a lot, actually, be on the Eurosport broadcast or be at their socials. That's a really good point, actually, and it just creates the clarity of that grey area where you wonder what's happening here. It's just like, this is what we've done, this is it, end of. And it settles it, really. Fans can be angry, of course, still, but if you're getting the answers, that's the best thing, isn't it? So, yeah, I hope things can change. And I just want to talk about Marquez's race, actually, as a result of that qualifying. 9th place, 2 third places in the end, and a great battle with Bastianini on the Saturday. It was a really, really good one. And then the Sunday holds an eye off, but then comes out straight after the race and calls it super boring.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, coming from 9th on the grid to 3rd, you think wouldn't be, but as we were saying with Martin, these places are made in the early laps, aren't they? And then everything just sort of settles into that same, the same positions then, and it's a sort of a, it's a battle against the stopwatch to the finish, isn't it? And that's a shame. I mean, in MotoGP now, the riders say basically, if you catch someone, you've got to pass them straight away. You've got to catch them, pass, and move on. If you stay behind them, even for a lap, that's it. The front tire's going to get hot. You lose performance. You lose the aero coming out of the corners, and it just becomes so much harder to pass. So it was again. The weekend for Marc really was conditioned by losing the qualifying lap, shall we say? I mean, you could almost make an argument that if there is a delay of a certain amount of time in telling people that actually you don't cancel the lap, that would be another option. Yeah. But again, it's just the nature of that compressed qualifying. I think it leads itself, and that's what MotoGP wanted when they did it, wasn't it? It was drama. They wanted the grid to be mixed up. But what we're finding now, talking about the racing side, is actually if you have one fast guy at the front and the other one buried in the grid, you don't have a good race on Saturday and Sunday. You need them both starting together, don't you? And it almost seems like the guys that start on the front in the sprint, they get all that information. They're even stronger in the Sunday race, aren't they? I guess their launch control is perfected. They know the tire pressures probably, if they're in sort of clearish air. Everything just seems to be, they get more information. They're even quicker on the Sunday. So I don't know. I personally, I'd like to see the sprint race grid shaken up. I think use the Friday afternoon times. It's already a shootout. For the top 10, people are already pushing. We're always told it's not a race, it's not a Grand Prix. So play around with it a bit. At least that way, yes, Martin would have paid the price for crashing and qualifying by starting down the order on Sunday, but maybe on Saturday we would have seen a better race. See the guys starting next to each other.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, Pete. I've said it. I didn't really understand the whole you get 2 bites at it sort of thing from I want to see a difference. A sprint race, F1 do it differently. I don't know if they've changed what they do, but they would have, I know from when they first introduced it, there'd be 2 separate qualifyings, and it would be like, well, this obviously the sprint results are for the Grand Prix grid. So it is. That's what F1 would do. Maybe MotoGP could look at something like that. I don't know. But then you have that risk of if someone crashes out in the sprinter at the back, it's like, but it's different. At least it gives them a more exciting opportunity to qualify better, I think. Lewis, any take?
Yeah, I think what this kind of proves as well, that maybe having sprints at every single Grand Prix weekend is also diluting kind of the show a bit as well, because you had, like we said, we had kind of quite an interesting sprint with Marc and Anea, but like it didn't carry on to the Grand Prix, and I don't think you can have a situation where a sprint race is more exciting than a Grand Prix. They need to kind of work hand in hand as a they need to complement each other. You've got this really exciting, fast paced, kind of like we see in superbikes, really. You've got the exciting, fast, 10 laps, and then you've got the longer race, which is still generally very exciting in most superbikes. F1 does this sort of, they have sprint qualifying on a Friday on a sprint weekend, and then but they do a stupid thing where they have the sprint race and then they have normal qualifying for the Grand Prix.
That's right.
That doesn't really work either. But there needs to be something kind of done to fix that. Whether it's maybe reduce the number of sprints, maybe it's I think the sprint at every single round is also contributing to this issue of racing not being great on a Sunday, because like you say, Pete, like you say, Jordan, there's too much emphasis put on Fridays, too much emphasis put on these tight qualifying sessions, and one mistake, it's over. And I think Marc, had he been on pole, that's a completely different Grand Prix. We might have had more of a race. Marc, Pedro and Pecco Bagnaia on the front row, that's much more exciting. That's going to be chance for fireworks there. And
definitely,
you can argue, okay, Marc shouldn't have exceeded track limits, that's fair enough. But as he said, he didn't think he had done, and when he sort of wondered had he maybe done it, and then when he saw that the lap didn't get cancelled, he was like, okay, it must have been fine then. So there is that element of like, well, you can't really blame the rider for being like, well, you should have known, because he thought he did, and then there was no cancellation. And of course, if that's the situation, you're like, well, okay, it must be fine then, and then and then that's it.
I just think that it's a really good conversation actually around qualifying. I just want to change. I think there's not enough emphasis on qualifying anymore. I feel like it's lost its prestige almost. I think, Pete, when you spoke to Livio Supo back in January with us, he kind of touched on something similar. He says, qualifying's just kind of forgot about now, and there needs to be more emphasis on it, and it needs to be seen as this is the prestigious thing to get you in the position for a Grand Prix. And whether they change the format for how it affects the sprint, or whether they make it a bit longer, like a 20-minute session instead of a 15-minute. I don't know what they do, but it'd be a conversation we could have in the off season, really, just about how we could change things. And this weekend really highlighted it. But like I said, good rides from Martin to salvage a P2 and Marquez to get P3 as well in both races. I'm trying to think where else we could go from here.
There was a bit of fuel or lack of fuel at the end, wasn't there? For a couple of riders, it seems, wasn't it? Obviously, the most notable, poor old Fabio, second time in 3 rounds. It splatters to a halt, and he took it quite well, didn't he, at San Marino? Because he had a competitive race, didn't he? And
exactly.
He's not really bothered 5th or 7th. I mean, whatever. But he thought, we've had a good race. We'll continue from here. But it was much more frustrating for Yamaha and Honda, wasn't it? Really, this weekend, the troubles with the rear grip that Zarco had kind of alluded to before the weekend that he was worried about, they really did show up, didn't they, in this weekend? And so a tough weekend, and then to cap it all, running out of fuel. And it seems like, as Quartararo says, the problem was he wasn't aware of it until literally the bike's spluttering, and then he gets the warning light. Whereas Aleix at Aprilia, he was running low, he got the warning, but with 4 or 5 laps to go, he changes the engine maps, and that's normal. And then he crossed the line. I mean, there's no point finishing the race with 3 litres of fuel. So in a way, you could say the Aprilia got it almost right. He was suffering wheel spin, so he still used more than he thought. But certainly frustration at Yamaha. The other thing I would point out about the Yamaha thing is, Fabio, others, they've been pushing for them to be more aggressive. This is the other side of that coin. Sometimes things go wrong, don't they? Whether it's a part braking or that's what happens when you're being aggressive. So I think you've got to sort of take that in mind as well. It's frustrating to have that happen, but if this is this new aggressive approach, it wouldn't have happened in the past because they would have done thousands of laps on the dyno and testing to get the fuel map absolutely perfect. Now they're going, we've got something, let's try it. Fabio is encouraging them to do that, isn't he? Sometimes it's going to go wrong, I'm afraid.
Yeah, Lewis, any take on it? He was pretty annoyed with Canal Plus. I seen a subtitled video, and he was he wasn't really happy about the situation.
No, and I think it was after the sprint or after qualifying, he ran out of fuel as well, and he was like shouting at the marshals to kind of give him a bit. He's clearly starting to get fed up with this. I mean, you do have to wonder that maybe because of the lack of power to overtake, to defend, really. And the lack of grip to do those sort of things, and given how crucial first laps are now, and that's where really Yamaha is going to make up the most of its positions in a Grand Prix, you do wonder if Yamaha are maybe running a bit more to the bone in terms of fuel loads to try and have that early advantage that can then be managed, because, well, once you've got track position, that's kind of half the battle. Yep. You'd think they would tell Fabio that, or maybe they have, and maybe his anger stems from the fact that he wasn't getting any warnings from it. I don't know, but it's very un-Japanese manufacturer, like, this the way that Yamaha operates now, which is good, which is what they need. I hope that these fuel running out issues isn't going to scare the Japanese wing of that manufacturer a bit too much, and to be thinking, oh, hang on, we're maybe doing a bit too much here, going a bit aggressive, we need to be a bit more mindful, a bit thoughtful here, because you don't want a situation where that happens and then that's going to be at complete odds with what Max Bartolini wants, and it kind of being a clash of heads there, and from the European and the Japanese side. So hopefully this doesn't make Yamaha kind of jumpy in terms of the rate of development, because they have again brought more things to Motegi. Yamaha had a sort of new modified chassis. That's right. Which didn't really seem to do anything, but it's just the fact that just chuck things at the bike and see what happens. This 2024 season has been an extended test session, so you might as well bring things. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's and like you say, they have the concessions now to they can try these things and see how on the edge they actually are, and they can maybe work it out in those extended days that they have to test things. It's not too bad, and I think obviously Quartararo's getting annoyed as he sees the other bikes ripping past him, but it's good for it to happen when they're in this development phase, I suppose, and instead of him having it when he's at the front. If say Yamaha get back there and say he ran out of fuel and he was on the podium, or he was that would be a different situation. So I can understand his annoyance, but these things happen, and when you're in that phase with Yamaha, it's a learning curve for them, and I think they'll sort it out. I want to talk about an incident that actually happened. I just wrote down here and I thought about it. Pete, Alex Marquez and Joan Mir. It was a lap one incident. It would have been a real nasty crash. Thankfully, it wasn't as bad as it ended up being, but it was a really scary incident where Alex Marquez had just came back online and Mir was going around the outside on the normal line, and they collided, and the Gresini Ducati got wedged in the rear of the Honda, and Alex hit the barriers. Obviously, thankfully, Joan stopped and the bike didn't hit him. But that was a real nasty incident. Alex Marquez has a long lap penalty to serve at Phillip Island, but it could have been so much worse, that one. Yeah,
that's it. Because it's one of those that it didn't take the normal trajectory, did it? Because Mir stayed on the bike, he suddenly ended up going towards what looked like a tyre wall that was fairly close, wasn't it? Because it wasn't the normal accident where you fall off the bike and you slide out of the corner, was it? He stayed on it and thankfully missed the barrier, and Alex Marquez did make it all the way, didn't he, sliding, so he was lucky as well. But yeah, it was a scary incident. Something, it was off camera, wasn't it? There was something happened at the end of the back straight. There was a lot of battles going on in that mid-pack. Yep. And as you say, he was offline, and then they come together on the two fast left-handers that lead into that sort of final chicane. So more misery for me. And double DNF, wasn't it? He retired from the sprint. I think he had a near high side, and then I think the brake pads probably got flung out, so then he couldn't stop at the next corner, so he was sort of 30 seconds behind, but then had some quite decent pace, and I think he was sort of optimistic for the Grand Prix, but didn't make it beyond that opening lap. As you say, Alex Marquez, long lap penalty for Australia. He feels a bit aggrieved, doesn't he, because he got taken down by Jack at the week before, but of course, as Lewis has pointed out, I think in the stories and things, the difference there was that Jack fell on his own, and then the bike went on. In this case, Alex sort of ran into the back of Mir. And of course, although the explanation just says, again, we got quite a good explanation from the stewards, didn't we? Causing a crash, There's no mention of the speed, which I always think should be sort of taken into account. It's one thing to sort of tap into another rider on a really slow hairpin.
Yeah.
It's another thing on a fast corner. It doesn't seem like that's part of the penalty process at the moment, but yeah, that would certainly also explain why he got a long lap for that as a first offence, isn't it? So of course he then is involved in another accident. Presumably it's a double long lap.
Yeah, Lewis, any take on it? It was his response after was obviously he felt a bit aggrieved because of what happened in Indonesia, but totally different situations. He deserved a penalty for it, I think.
Yeah, 100%. It was a bit of a reckless crash, really, from Alex. Yes, there's a lot of ground to be made up in first laps, but he'd made a mistake. You kind of have to play the game a bit. You have to kind of concede, a bit of ground sometimes. A little bit like Aragon as well with Pecco, although I would kind of maybe lay the blame at Pecco's door a little bit more on that one than Alex Marquez necessarily. I think Alex kind of does struggle a little bit sometimes to just sort of accept defeat. We've seen it before a few times. Mir kind of, I think, unfairly was quite critical of Alex Marquez, but he does have a little bit of a rep sheet when it comes to that type of stuff. So yeah, I think the stewards. If I was Alex Marquez, the one thing I would pick a hole in terms of the stewards' notification is you rode in a way that caused a rider to crash, which you can kind of argue is any incident really. Jack Miller rode in a way that caused riders to crash, even though he crashed on his own in Indonesia. So you can kind of see why he's a bit, he feels aggrieved by that, but that's an issue for another day. He caused it was an avoidable incident. It was a silly incident, and he's gonna have to take that one on the chin. Yeah,
like I say, penalty, long lap at the Grand Prix for Phillip Island. So yeah, that'll scupper his race. As we always know, it's a very close race around there usually. So that'll be a tough penalty for Alex to take. But like I say, I think he deserved it. Just to touch on Maverick Vinales, Pete, it was a really good qualifying, and optimistically I thought, well, Maverick seems like a good pace here, but then issue with ride height devices, start devices at the start of the sprint, and then he made a terrible start in the Grand Prix, crashed out. Just a very Maverick weekend. I don't like using that term, but it was very much like when things go wrong for Maverick, they go wrong, don't they?
As you say, it was really promising, wasn't it, on Friday? That third on the grid, especially because the stop and go track, all about braking, obviously, on the way into those stop and go corners, and the Aprilia hasn't been strong there. He's been complaining about inconsistency, so it was, it looked like, well, here we are. They've made some real progress there, but as you say, it just didn't then carry on to the rest of the weekend. The ride height device thing, not braking hard enough for turn one. Whether that was because other riders moved across on him or whatever it was, but I don't think it was actually a technical fault as such. It was just that, he didn't get the chance to brake hard enough to disengage it. So that was that ruined. But then, in the main Grand Prix, I think he was behind Aleix, wasn't he, when he sort of retired mid-distance. So, pretty disappointing, really. I think both Aprilias, certainly both factory Aprilias, battling a lot with wheel spin, and that also is reflected by Aleix running out of fuel. They're spinning so much, they're burning more fuel than they expected. So really struggled for a lack of grip this weekend, and it's a really disappointing weekend given where they started from, and because they're in a bit of a tough run at the moment, aren't they, Aprilia? Really, it's KTM have sort of regained the initiative there in that best of the rest behind Ducati. They're now, I think it's 20 points clear, aren't they, in the constructors? The flyaways have often been quite difficult for Aprilia, and unfortunately, they've started that way again, haven't they?
Yeah, Lewis, it looked like Pete said, they maybe made not a step, they just kind of regained to where they'd found something with Maverick's qualifying, but it was just, a bit tough for all the Aprilias, I suppose. Obviously, Miguel Oliveira's not there, Salvadori's in replacing him, Ralph Fernandez struggled. It's just kind of the same repeat story, isn't it, from the races that we've seen previously.
Yeah, I think Aprilia described Maverick's lap as like a bit of magic, which, I think looking at where the other Aprilias were, you can probably argue that Maverick was the contributing factor to that qualifying lap rather than the bike. I mean, we know that the RSGP is quite good over a single lap. Generally, we've seen that this season for the most part. So Maverick's always been like, yeah, there's still potential in the bike. There's potential in the bike. He's a bit more upbeat about it than the rest of them. And to be fair to him, he at least shows that there is a bit of speed in it. But yeah, hooking it up in the races, as you say, it's a very Maverick kind of thing to really just lack that consistency from qualifying to races. And it's frustrating because I kind of thought we really had got to a point where we'd moved away from that from Maverick, and now he's kind of going back to it. And you can blame the bike a bit, but if you're starting third, you should be not dropping down as quite rapidly as what he was doing.
Yeah, and I think I was right in saying he made contact with Marquez on turn 1 yesterday in the Grand Prix, and I don't know if that set him going back, but it didn't bother Marquez. He just went straight through. Any contact, he just didn't even feel it, I don't think. So a very I don't like saying Maverick weekend, but I hope he can turn it around for Phillip Island, a track he usually goes really well at. Parking MotoGP. Now, gents, I want to talk about the other classes. We have a new world champion in Moto 3 with David Alonso. I mean, it's no surprise at all, but again, it didn't really just... I looked at the weekend and thought, where's Alonso's strength going to be? He wasn't really the quickest in practice, and then it gets to the race, and he just knows how to manage things so well, Pete. He's a real breath of fresh air. The MotoGP riders talking about him. Marquez saying he has so much charisma. Pecco Bagnaia saying, I think it was quite funny, he was asking him what he was eating for his breakfast. So he's wanting to find out little things, like to get an advantage. Marquez is likening him to a sponge. Just a really, a good world champion to have. And at such a young age as well.
Exactly, yeah. He's 18, isn't he? He's only second year, I think, full time. Ex Red Bull Rookies champion, and just coming back to what the MotoGP riders were saying, I think Pecco summed it up. Also, we've seen master of the last 3 laps, isn't he? And I think that does sum up, Alonso's year. He really, that racecraft is that was his 10th win, was it?
Yep, 10th, yep.
So he's pushing for the all-time record, isn't he? At this rate, fantastic season for him, and he's just someone who seems to just love everything about being a motorcycle racer, not just the riding on the bike. He's enthusiastic, he's engaging off the bike as well. I haven't actually interviewed him myself, but I've spoken to people that have, and they've been really impressed with him. For someone that young, quite often Moto3 riders, they just want to ride the bike. They don't want to deal with all the other stuff. That's that comes later, sort of thing. But no, he's 100% focused on it. And as you say, asking Bagnaia what he eats, I mean, that's a classic example of it, isn't it? But it's what it takes if you want to be a great champion, isn't it? You want to learn everything from the guys that are at the top. So I think as Marquez also said, let's not pile too much pressure on him. But it certainly looks like he's somebody with a great future ahead. Yeah,
little things as well, like. He learned German so he could speak to service TV, like little things like that. It's like, didn't need to do that. Like he's a really good character, and I really like Lewis. I don't know if you've seen it. He talked about what he done the night before the race, and he looked at himself in the mirror and he says, "You're going to be world champion," and he started to cry in the mirror in Japan in his hotel, and it got really emotional. And I think for someone so young to show this intelligence and just love for the sport and realizes where he is, it's such a refreshing thing, isn't it?
Yeah, he said he wrote himself a letter and sent it to someone in the team that he wasn't to open until he was world champion. And I think, we're seeing a kind of a level of intelligence from a young rider we haven't seen for a long time. And I mean, not just in a racing sense, and in a kind of a worldview sense. He did an interview with MotoGP.com before the weekend started, and I was really, really surprised at just how, given his grasp of English isn't brilliant, just how kind of articulate that he was, and very down to earth and very, very smart. And I think we need that. We need, I know that there's a certain generation of fans that wants the Barry Sheen types and stuff like that, but I think we need more young riders who are a bit more in tune with the world around them, that are not afraid to kind of bear some emotions, or not, that type of thing. I think is really good for sport in general. I think it gives it a much more human level, and I think David Alonso is going to be one of these riders that, if the success carries on, which I think it will, could have a really big impact on shifting sort of fan bases in MotoGP in the future, because he is a much more I don't know if relatable is the right word, but you know, you don't feel like you're looking at a superstar sports person. You're looking at someone who's very grateful to do their job and works really hard as well. You know, his first Moto3 race, he was last miles off the pace, and apparently that was some sort of bet he had with his junior GP team. That was like, you know, if I win, I'll come and do a race. And they were like, you're not ready, and he was like, I'll show you. And then they were like, well, we told you. And so he went and did more seasons, you know, in the junior championships to build up to that. And you know, that level of humility that's going to get you far. Yeah,
for sure. Pete, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if anyone wants to read a really good interview with David Alonso, the official MotoGP magazine, GP Mag, have got one. Thomas Bajard has done one, and one of the quotes from it, which I'll just give you, is he said, you know, my family had to make quite a few sacrifices for me to go racing. One of them was heating.
Wow.
You know, they actually, you know, so this shows you the background of the guy and how he appreciates everything that's got him to where he is. So if you want to know about someone that's hungry, I think, you know, he's your man. So yeah, take a look at that interview, because yeah, it's very interesting. As Lewis has said, he's a guy who clearly, you know, he's got a lot about him, and yeah, I think very good for the sport as a whole.
Absolutely. And even like you say, Pete, he appreciates where he came from, the celebration. I don't know if he knew it was planned, but they got his first ever bike, his little pocket bike, and he rode it around, and it was a really nice moment that I thought was really personable. And yeah, it came across very just grateful for everything, and I love to see it. And I can't wait to see how he goes in Moto2 next year. As Marc Marquez says, don't put pressure on the kid. He's going to make mistakes, but I think he's got something really special. And as you mentioned, Pete, he is one win away from equaling Valentino Rossi's 27-year record for most wins in a lightweight class seasons. What's that, 11? And I think he's won the most races anyway in Moto3. I think it's 14 or 15 now. So he's, yeah. I didn't think we'd see a better Moto3 rider than Joan Mir. That 2017 season was incredible. But I think this year is, yeah, I think I'd put Alonso as probably, since 2012, he's been the best Moto3 rider that we've seen. And I hope it continues in Moto2, and who knows, down the line we could see maybe Marc Marquez versus David Alonso. That would be something pretty special, I think. And then to touch on Moto2, it seems like the World Championship, guys, is coming to an end there. Ogura delivering on home soil, but I didn't think it was I thought it was a real risky choice what he'd done. He picked slick tires when the majority went for the wets, and it was a gamble that paid off massively in the championship battle, didn't it, Lewis?
Yeah, it was. I don't know if it goes back to maybe that sort of thing from Mazzano with Pecco and Bastianini, of that kind of like local knowledge and understanding of, you know, what the weather's like in the region, and you know, obviously they understood that the track wasn't wet enough from the smell. So I don't know if Ogura's obviously knows what the weather, you know, when you've got those kind of conditions where it's threatening to rain but not quite rain, and you know, I wonder how much of that played a part as well, just knowing that, you know, yes, it feels like it's going to rain, but we'll be fine. You know, it was a gamble, but I think it would have been a calculated one. I don't think it was a fully risky, you know.
Yeah.
Because Ogura's got to be too smart now to throw away championship points, you know, kind of needlessly. Like, you know, like we've seen in previous years when he's been in championship battles, and there's been just moments of complete madness where you're like, what on earth are you doing? Yeah, and I think it's testament to the belief he has in himself, and the confidence he has to make these things work.
Yeah.
And once again proven that, yeah, really, once everything is shaken out and the dust is settled, that when you look at the guys coming to MotoGP next year, there's no one more deserving than Ogura.
Exactly. And that's a really good point, actually, Lewis. Pete, as he says, to be able to have the clarity to think like that in a pressure situation where your head can maybe get swayed by your title rivals, you know what they're going to do. Maybe he looked across at Sergio Garcia and went, well, he's picking the wets, I might do that. But no, the confidence to go, we're going to do this as a team, let's back it, let's go for the dries. I mean, a P2 finish, he was pretty gutted, to be fair. He wanted to win in front of his home fans, but it was just a real show of his character, I think. And I think it's really kind of, I don't want to say it's too early, it's kind of put to bed the mistake of 22, I think, from Malaysia, where he was going to maybe win the title and he threw it away. This was a real sort of a defining moment in his career so far.
I think that's a good point to bring that one up, because there were a lot of people after that mistake sort of questioning his judgment, weren't they? Did he need to take that risk and all that kind of thing? And this puts an end to that, doesn't it? And we've all been talking about Jorge Martin and taking the gamble and it all backfiring and saying let's do the safe thing, follow your championship rival. And here's an example of, actually, if you're convinced that you've got a chance to really sort of strike while the iron's hot, then go for it. But really brave decision, and just the perfect decision, wasn't it? While we were all watching the race, wasn't it? After the first lap, really, it was apparent that he'd made the right choice, as long as there was no further rain. He was only, I think, 3 seconds behind the leader, wasn't he? And okay, it was a restart, so it was only a short race, but still, you would have to be sort of 12, 15 seconds behind on the opening lap to kind of not make up the difference if the track is drying. The track did dry, obviously. Gonzalez, also really pleased for him, coming across from the Superbike paddock, Super Sport paddock 300 paddock championship as well, getting that win. I think he's deserved that as well. He's a talented guy, so let's see, now he's got that sort of that win under his belt, where he can go from there. And and of course his teammate Alberto Reyes, who pulls in and swaps. So again, it swaps the tyres. But I think that also, coming back to Ogura, just shows that there were guys even on the warm up lap
on the right tyre thinking that was
thinking it was wrong. Exactly. Yeah. So it wasn't just a case of making the call in the garage and then going out and Ogura maybe thinking, oh yeah, I've got this in the bag, because there were other guys on the same tyre going, I've made a big mistake here. I'm going to pull into the pits, even though your race is over. Joe Roberts also pitted, didn't he? But I mean, this is an F1. I'm afraid in a race that short, you once you've made the choice, you've just got to stay with it, haven't you? Because there's no way to make up to make anything up. So again, all or nothing decision by Ogura, and it paid off. It paid off in spades for him. So well deserved.
Massively, and I echo the statement you said about Manu Gonzalez. A real hard jump to make that from Super Sport, like you say, 300s as well, coming across the Grand Prix paddock. That's a real massive, I think, for that side of the championship, for Super Sport, they can even say, look what riders can do. It's a progression sort of thing, and I think that's a really great win for him, and just for his journey, because he's been quick ever since he came into Grand Prix. He's really shown potential, and very happy to see him get the win. Lewis, anything to add?
Sorry guys, but no, I was just going to say, you reminded me, Tajiro Kato's son waving the checkered
flag.
Right. I mean,
so cool.
And doesn't he look like him?
He does.
Wow, just for a Grassini rider to take the win, that was just perfect, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry guys, carry on.
No, that's a really good point, actually. And like I say, Ogura had the flag still, the Tajiro Kato flag that had been used, and he had, I'll put a photo on the screen now for our watchers, on the pole that the flags only had all Kato stickers on it, which is really cool. So it was, I thought, and like I say, to see Tajiro Kato's son waving the flag, I think that was really nice. And as well, nice to see Nori Haga in the paddock as well. He was getting a tour with Ducati, and very nice to see him there. It was a nice little video Ducati put up. But like I say, Lewis, Ogura has a chance now at Australia to wrap up the title, 60 points. I think it's going to happen surely the next 2 rounds. I think maybe he could do it next time out.
Well, as we were talking about before we came on air, so Ogura's hadn't had a brilliant record at Australia. No. So it's going to be a real kind of crunch point for him, because he's not really been in a situation before where he can win it. He is the favourite to win a championship. He's been in the fight, but he's not been the overwhelming favourite. So it'll be interesting to see what the approach is. Is he cautious? Does he throw? He's got a lot of time. I think with all due respect to his competitors, they're not consistently good enough to be as quick as him. He is clearly a cut above the rest in that championship now. So he's got time on his side, so he doesn't need to be reckless with anything. So that in theory eases the pressure a bit coming to Australia. So we'll see. I think more likely, just based on past performances, we'll see it in Thailand, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, we will. And then on that's us done. And thankfully, there's a week break. I don't know if fans would be gutted, but I'm certainly grateful for a week off, as the Australia race will be, difficult to watch on this side of the world. It'll be very early for us. But MotoGP, it's set up nicely, a 10-point lead for Martin. Going into Australia, he wants a bit of redemption, I think, heading into there after what happened last year? Can Bagnaia continue his strong form? Can Marquez get involved? Can Bastianini get involved? I imagine so. It's always a great race at Phillip Island, but we'll cover that in our podcast next week in full. And if you enjoyed the episode, like, subscribe if you're watching. If you're on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, listen. Hit the follow button. You'll never miss an episode. And make sure to give us a 5-star review as well. Until next time, we'll see you then.